May I? Got to get everybody's attention. All right. Okay. I'd like to welcome everybody to the joint city council meeting of the date is June 18th, 2024. We do have a number of our mayors in attendance and our city council members in attendance, and I appreciate you all coming here so much, and also the general populace that is interested in this item. I appreciate them coming in. I do have some announcements to make, but before we do that, first of all, I need to excuse a couple of our mayors, Troy Walker and Denise Anderson, are both, not able to make it here tonight. But that being said, I'd like to start this meeting, as many of us do, I know, our city council meeting, with an opening prayer, and then we're going to have a pledge of allegiance. I've asked Mayor Frost if he'd come up and give us a prayer in this meeting, and then we're going to have Mayor Osler lead us in the pledge.
Heavenly Father, we are grateful to be able to gather here on this beautiful evening as elected officials and concerned citizens everywhere. We're grateful, Heavenly Father, for this beautiful land in which we live, for the freedoms that we enjoy, and for the quality of life that we enjoy. We are grateful for each other and for the opportunity we have tonight to discuss an important topic in our city and in our community and in our county. We pray that we might be able to have open minds, that we might be able to gain knowledge and understanding, and to best represent the will of our residents. We are grateful, Heavenly Father, for those who are protecting our land. Pray that that will bless them, protect them from harm and danger. Those that are on our borders, that are on our streets, we're grateful for them. We say these things this night.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mayor Frost and Mayor Osler, for doing that. I can't remember if I introduced myself. I'm Mayor Johnson with Lehigh City. This is a historic event. I've been involved in city politics for over 22 years now, and I've never seen a time where we've had a joint council meeting such as this. So this is really a special occasion. I would like to say this because I'm actually pretty excited about it, because I think the things we are looking at are in the best interests of our communities. I fully believe that. I hope we can come to recognize that shortly. I'm kind of like a cow walking through a field of tall grass. I'm utterly tickled to be here. I knew Paige would get it because she's heard that joke before. So that being said, there are some announcements I need to make. One of those is Laura Lewis has done the financial study on this, is running a little bit late. She had some car problem on the way here. So she's anticipating being here in the next 10 minutes. So because it's hard to move forward with this meeting until she shows up. But I already had asked everybody to sign the attendance sheet. That's vitally important, because we need to know what council members, in fact, what elected officials are here, and we need to know what staff members are also here. On that sheet, it asks you to also identify the city you're from, and what your position is well. So if you would make sure that you do that. One thing about tonight that is important: we are going to have some public hearings. There's going to be at least 2 public hearings in each city. So there will be no general public comments taken tonight. The comments that will come tonight will come from city council members, and that after the presentation is given by Ms. Lewis. And so the microphones are at both these tables. So elected officials, when you have questions, just go ahead and come up and take a position. We probably ought to put maybe a couple seats behind those microphones. Seem kind of short. Stand behind. Are they hurt? Maybe that'll work. Okay. Stand, because we don't want your questions to last too long. So but please do that, and make sure when you use those microphones that it is very close to you. To do that, because this session is being recorded, and I know I've already have some interest from people who want to watch what's the discussion that's going to take place tonight. They're very interested in the financial analysis. I'm sure they're going to be interested in your questions as well. Okay. There will be a PowerPoint. Yes. I believe it is. Yes. I'm going to have to bend over to get closer to the mic. Okay, and I apologize. I will try to do that. I felt pretty loud to me, so. But yes, it should be live streamed right now, and hopefully everybody can listen to this, and hopefully everything comes through in the video recording. There will be a PowerPoint presentation. In the PowerPoint presentation, there will be the dates for every city's public hearing. So if you're interested in making public comment, please make note of those dates, because that is your opportunity to come and make those comments, and the cities will welcome those comments. There is a website up and running. It may take a little bit of time to refine that, as many websites do, but I'll give you the name of the website. It's centralschooldistrict.org. Okay, centralschooldistrict.org is the website. I've been told by those who are running it that they'll continue to work on that to make sure it works efficiently, and any questions that you bring up there can be answered. Yes. That is a very good question. Who can answer that question for me, because I don't have it?
Yes, we will be working with the communications team to post the PowerPoint as well as the final analysis on the website. Yeah.
Okay. Also, when you have a question after these two short questions we've just had, come up to the microphone and state your name and the organization you represent, so that those who are watching the video and are participating in the live feed can hear that clearly and move forward. So, that being said, mayors, and just attention here, because since we have to wait for Laura to get here, do you have any other specific questions? That is correct, right? So the dates, I'm assuming that the dates that will be in the PowerPoint presentation will be listed for each city, and they'll probably be close, since most of us hold our meetings on Tuesdays, but not everybody does. Oh, gosh, look at that. The miracle. So the ones you're interested in, of course, is the city that you live in, and it'd probably be most appropriate that you attend the city you live in and make your public comments there if you want to be heard. Do we have anything else on this? I'd like to take another question from the mayors, because I don't know what to do. I can stand up here and tell a few more dad jokes, but I don't know that you want me to do that. You mean from the meeting tonight or in future meetings? Yeah. So,
Mayor
Not as a
Johnson,
matter of
will you repeat the
policy.
question for our online folks?
I'm going to, not as a matter of policy, we typically in Lehigh City, we take comments from people that do not live in the city. Often we do not know really if they live in the city or not, right? I think that's probably appropriate if they want to come and make comment. If you have a large crowd, I think it would probably be wise to limit the time of your comments. We often do that if our chambers are packed. I'm sure you guys all do the very same thing, right? That's appropriate to do that. So, but I think, yes, in answer to the question, whether or not somebody wants to make comment in the central district, in one of the cities proposed in the central district, can they make those at any city that they wish? I think that can happen. I don't know that we would be able to.
I'm sure they can. I guess I'm just, are you going to allow it? Or are you going to allow it? I'm really still.
Okay, let's take an individual poll. Those who are here, I'm going to allow it. Bert?
I would guesstimate that Highland City would also allow any public comment from anyone.
Okay.
An interesting question, right? I think in the past, we've always accepted public comment from other cities, but I don't know. That's probably something we'll have to contemplate because
I would suggest, and we've done this before, like one, where we've actually had people identify where they lived before they made public comment. And I think that would be totally appropriate to do that.
they always have to state their name and their address.
Yeah.
So no matter what city they're from.
I've had some people hesitant to state their address, Big Brother coming in, checking in on them or something after their public comment. But it would be nice if they at least said if they're outside the city. So as a matter of, maybe as a matter of routine, we all do the same thing. That's the microphone back. Yes, yeah, I did announce that, but I'll reinforce it. Please state your name and your position.
So, Mike Geddes, I'm the mayor pro tem at Cedar Hills. Mayor Anderson's out of town, so I'm here today as the representative, as mayor. I'd just like to answer that question. We allow anybody to speak in our public comments. They state their name and their address.
Okay.
I'm not sure if this was Mayor Frost's question. For me, I want the residents within the interlocal to have an opportunity to express their opinion. So if, let's say somebody in Lehigh can't attend one of those meetings, but maybe the one in Draper works or the one in Cedar Hills works, I don't see an issue with that, but I'm not sure if, because they don't get to vote in our interlocal, if somebody comes from Pleasant Grove or Linden or Saratoga Springs, if that's necessarily appropriate. That's just my opinion. And Paul Hancock, Lehigh City Council.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Actually, Paul, I think that's an excellent point, right? But unfortunately, there's some things going on in the state's special session that starts tomorrow that may help clarify the reason for that. But I agree, depending on what comes out of the special session, it may be appropriate to only allow those who actually have an opportunity to vote. Okay.
Ron Campbell, Highland City Council. I think public means public. I would hate to go against that when it just has other ramifications in terms of transparency. If somebody's got a comment that doesn't happen to live in the 5 cities but somehow impact them, there's
meeting is being recorded.
There's an impact. And I think we need to hear all voices, and public means public, in my view.
Okay. I'm I'm still of the opinion that I think it's going to be up to the mayors on how you want to conduct those meetings. Right? Because I actually agree with both those arguments given. I mean, they're both fair and understandable. So, that being said, I'm about ready to turn the time over to Laura Lewis. So as she walks in through the doors and makes her way back to the council meeting here, I will give her a brief announcement with some accolades. I've had an opportunity to work with Laura Lewis for through a number of years and on a number of bond issues, and I found her to be probably one of the most highly respected financial advisors in the state of Utah. And I've always appreciated her input. It's always been very understandable, very believable, and in my consideration, extremely accurate. And so that being said, and I hope I embarrassed you well, Laura, we've been waiting for you to show up, biding our time. So if you want to come up here and present, the microphone is yours.
How's that? Excellent. Okay. Oh dear, I might need someone to drive because I'm going to be looking at my sheets. Yeah. But this won't help them. Are you going to be changing that? You want to be changing that? Excellent. All right, thank you. All right, well, thank you for the introduction. A little bit about my firm, not just about me. I am one of the owners of LRB Public Finance Advisors. I have a staff of about 17. I haven't counted recently. And some of those staff are very well experienced in doing these school district studies. Fred Philpott, one of my colleagues, we've worked together for probably 20 years. And he actually was the author of the study when Canyon split from Jordan's school district. So one of the first school district splits in the state that I'm aware of. He spent roughly a year on that analysis. He also worked to look at South Jordan and West Jordan breaking away from that district on their own. So he's well experienced in that. He unfortunately, Tuesday night's a popular night for council meetings. That's probably not a news flash to any of you. And so we've had to divide and conquer with our presentations. I'm hoping that he will be available electronically to answer questions because he knows the Excel model inside and out, and it's really, really deep and complex. So if you want to say, well, what if? He might be able to give us some sense by, tweaking the model. I do not have that depth of understanding on the model. The time that we've taken to work on this study has limited the depth that we could undertake in some areas and limited the review by some stakeholders. That stated, I'm very confident in the numbers that we've prepared and what I'll be presenting to you and its conclusions. And not spoiler alert, but it's really good news relative to those of you that might want to support or are in support of the Central District breaking away from Alpine School District. The feasibility study was initiated based on the requirement of Utah Code Section 53G. If you ever need to sleep and having trouble with that, just whip it open and start reading it. It's pretty broadly written, unlike some portions of the state code, and it states in it basically that a school, cities that want to break away from a school district have to conduct a study, and you have to look at the financial impact on the new district and the remaining district, the financial impact, which is different than the tax impact. We only need to look at the tax impact for the new district so that you would be able to have some reasonable basis to tell your voters, your constituents, what the tax impact on their tax bill might be. The depth and scope of the feasibility study is within the discretion of the interlocal legislative bodies that are creating the new district. What we have provided in this written report will give you 5 cities the ability to set the interlocal, start the process in motion. You would not need to do any more analysis. We certainly, with more time, can do more analysis and, answer more and deeper questions. But what we've done here allows you to proceed forward. As required by the code, this focuses primarily or almost entirely on the financial impacts of creating the new district, financial and tax impacts. It does not seek to discuss any impacts that may occur for school programming. We are not school programming experts, and when we did the Jordan study several years ago, we actually we worked with a sub-third party to work with us who had that experience nationwide relative to impacts that might happen on programming matters. So the final comparison that you'll see, we'll be looking at, let me back up. So throughout the presentation, I will refer to ASD, Alpine School District. When we're making the comparison with Alpine School District, it is as currently constituted without, so we look at Alpine School District versus the new district, which would be cities for those of you that are gathered here. Then which we have referred to as the central district. So the central, and I'll use interchangeable, I think we refer to as the new central district. So sometimes I say new, sometimes I say central. Know that I mean that's all of you: Lehigh, Highland, Alpine, Cedar Hills, American Fork, and the portion of Draper City that falls within Alpine School District. When we look at the final comparison, we look at Alpine School District as currently constituted compared to the new central district. We do have a few data points that we term the reorganized district, which, question? Someone can't hear me? Woo.
Yeah, it was Erin. I just muted her though, so you're good.
Oh, okay. All right. We do have a few data points comparing what we term as the reorganized district. Probably most of you are aware that the cities on the west side of Alpine District, Eagle Mountain, Saratoga, Cedar Fort, and Fairfield, have already created an interlocal and are going through the process to, have the number of days expire and hold the public hearing. So they are well underway with their plan to break away from the district. So even though it's not a requirement of the state law, we do have a few slides where we talk about the reorganized district. When I refer to the reorganized district, that means the cities that would be left if indeed the West District breaks off, if indeed new Central District breaks off, and then what is left in that reorganized district would be Linden, Orem, Vineyard, and Pleasant Grove. So you'll see a few of those. So the analysis that we've conducted focuses on the following. I'll talk first about enrollment and taxable value. There is a written report that has a little bit more detail than what I'll go through today. But that's a real critical element, and again, happy to report that it's really good news for the new Central District. General fund financial analysis will be something else we'll talk about. The capital projects fund financial analysis. It's kind of the quickest of all of them. Debt service fund financial analysis, and then the summary of the tax impacts. So the base financial assumptions, the enrollment projections that we developed use fiscal year 23 projected enrollment growth from Alpine School District as the base of our data. It's important to know that we worked really hard to try to use the most current data that we could find. Again, knowing that we're trying to do our very best to compare apples to apples, we used data that was provided to us by Alpine School District. So one important thing, and I will probably mention it later, but they assume that there'll be a 2.5% growth in their employment costs and a 1% growth in their other, factors of that will, expenses that will grow over time. While You know, I could stand up here and debate, is 2.5% the right number? It could be, right? I'm not here to critique that. I'm here to say that's the data set they're using. So rather than us rework all of their numbers, right, when we're doing the comparison, if they use 2.5, ta-da, we're going to use 2.5. So we've tried to be reasonable as how we've approached that. For purposes in determining the projected enrollment, we evaluated their historic enrollment data, and as you know, they provided by each city, and then we applied an annual average growth rate to those subsequent years. So we said, here's what it is today, and looking at historically how those student populations have grown by city, we have grown each of those by city for the new district. The ratio of the enrollment for each district was used to forecast weighted pupil units. The state, Fred can give you more. To me, it's a little bit like magic. They apply a factor to from enrollment to a weighted pupil unit. They take a lot of things into account as they're doing that. The current factor is 0.996 to go from a weighted from the enrollment to weighted pupil unit. And yet, if you're really savvy or have really good head math, you'll look at those first two columns and say, well, if I grab 2023 and I'm only reducing it by 0.004%, that number is going to be a lot higher for Alpine School District, from 84,668 down to 81,170. Those first two lines are data that they currently have, that they currently use. So we said, okay, here's what we know as actual. For the projections, we've taken the projected increase in that student population, and then we have used the discount factor of what the state is currently using as a weighted pupil unit. Want to make sure you know that we can do math. And the other part that you'll go, oh, can she do math? Is if you look to the far right side and you'll say, well, golly gee, Laura, the new district percentage of total and the reorganized district, those do not add up to 100%. Where's the rest? The rest is out west, right? We have assumed, again, in this analysis that they are going to split off. So that's where the rest of those percentages, the rest of those students are. So that's why that does not add up. All right, so as you can see, based on this data, the new district, the new central district, would take with it or have incorporated in it 41.12% of those students, and that grows slightly over time because you have more land that can be developed, more population that's likely to come in relative to the other district. So it's not huge, but it does grow over time. The reorganized district percent of that total declines because they don't have that much growth. All right, next slide. Okay, taxable value. That's something that everyone who has ever worked with or on a city council understands taxable value. It is different than the market value of your home. If you think of it, down to like a single individual, the taxable value of your home, if you reside in your home, is discounted 45% from its market value. These taxable values are for the entire city or cities combined. And our goal is to look at what the taxable value of the remaining Alpine School District would do compared to the new central district. Taxable value forms the basis for local revenues. So there are three buckets of not only three, the largest three buckets of money that make up a school district's financials. And that is their general fund, their capital fund, and their debt fund. And those local revenues under the general fund, you have local revenues, state revenues, and federal revenues. The local revenues are what probably most people think of when they think of how does a school district get money. You think, oh, I look on my tax bill and I see Alpine School District and I see 0.00212 or whatever it is, and I multiply that by my taxable value, and voila, that's the taxes I pay to the school district. Those funds go into the local revenues. And let's see, what else do we need to know about that? Also, the local revenues are where, when you go to, vote for, do we want a new high school or whatever, it's a local tax revenue that gets imposed on those, that taxable value to generate the revenues to pay that debt. That comes into play when we talk about the debt here in a little bit. Based on the historic certified tax rate data, so we looked at each individual cities, your historical taxable value data for Lehigh, Highland, Alpine, Cedar Hills, American Fork, and Draper. And when we looked at that historically, we think it's very defensible to project that those taxable values will grow by 3% on a compounded basis. To determine the taxable value growth for Alpine School District, we looked at the remaining cities and the new West District. We broke those out. The new, I think, half of, right, so the important numbers there at the bottom. Alpine School District, as currently constituted, will grow at 3.9%, or 3.29, excuse me. The new Central, we think, would grow about 3%. And importantly, for the remaining, that reorganized district, remember that's the Orem South cities, we'll call them, they are likely only to grow by 0.5%. You think, well, what's wrong with them, right? Well, nothing's wrong with them. It's a matter of they are more landlocked, and the cities in New Central, particularly Lehigh, has a lot of room. There can still be a lot of growth. So based on these assumptions, it's estimated the new Central District's taxable value will slightly increase from 45% of the taxable value in 2025, or slightly decrease from 45% to 44% by 2029. The biggest impact that probably has is in determining what portion of Alpine School District's existing debt that the new school district has to take with it, so to speak. But as we compare, and I'm sorry that my staff didn't put this slide up there, but I believe it's in the report. When you look at the taxable value per student, so again, as one metric point, we now know that the taxable value in the new school district is likely to grow at this 3%. In the reorganized, it's only going to grow by 0.5%. So your taxable value is going to continue to grow. And relative to your student population, the new school district is in better shape. You have more taxable value per capita of students, capita of all your citizens, but higher taxable value per student population in the new Central District. What that does is it provides would provide the new local school district with more local revenues per pupil. But, this is where it gets like this mystery box to me up at the state. The state seeks, with their weighted pupil unit calculations and their state revenues, they seek to do, and it's not like, we're going to do this perfect, squaring up for everybody. But they do seek to level the playing field a little bit. I mean, think about, a student in Ophir, and that's smallest city, I think, in the state, compared to a student in Park City, right, where the taxable values of those cities are very different. Part of the state formula seeks to equalize those a little bit. So as you end up with more taxable value per student, there may be some offsetting reduction in what the state provides, but it frankly is almost impossible to determine that down to the dollar, but we have, taken a potential reduction into account as we've looked at those numbers. We've been over that. Again, those percentages don't add up because we haven't brought in the West. All right, the new Central District enrollment and taxable value growth will be higher than the reorganized district. I'm repeating myself a little bit here. Sorry about that. You'll have a higher taxable value per student. Your future taxable values will, however, be influenced by actual new growth. I mean, with any study that we do that's looking out to the future, neither I nor Fred, no matter how good he is, we do not have a perfect crystal ball of what will happen with your taxable values over time. It is reasonable to assume that given the growth that we've had in this state and are still having along the Wasatch Front and how good the economy is doing in Utah, that we'll still have very significant growth. But if for some reason, I mean, we beam ourselves back to 2008 when the economy kind of slowed, taxable values didn't grow at that kind of clip. So all those kind of things will influence what actually happens going forward. They could also be impacted. I was talking to a group earlier today, and I'm like, so yay, taxable values are growing. As a school district, what you'd love to see, what school districts love is, yay, bring more businesses that don't bring kids. Right? Why is that? Because, oh, we get higher taxable value, and I don't have more butts in the seats that I have to educate, right? But what, in order to get those new businesses to come in, it's not uncommon in the state of Utah. We're very development friendly. It's not uncommon that some type of tax increment will be utilized to motivate those businesses to come in. When that happens, it can also have an impact on this. And it's the kind of thing that we could, go into the weeds for another 6 months to try to estimate what that would look like. But just know that we've kind of held everybody neutral, right? We're not assuming that, the the reorganized, district in Orem is going to have a lot more economic development than you will, or vice versa. Based on our analysis, what will show is certainly the new district is feasible and viable. The state law refers to the fact that you have to make a finding that it is viable. It does not define what viable is, and so it's sort of in the beauty of the beholder. Some may say, oh, well, if it's going to cost us a dime more, it's not viable. So we've done a similar, not even as in depth as yours, and again, nowhere near as in depth as we could go, but we did a similar analysis for the West schools, and what we showed is it will likely cost them. I mean, they have a lot of need. Their taxable value will catch up, but it's right now it's not what the rest of yours is, and so it's likely to cost them. Does it mean it's not viable? No. It means that they go in with their eyes wide open, and it's viable. Maybe a cost, or maybe some things that they can do that will help them, to reduce some of those costs as they, create a new district. So viability does not mean that you have to effectively save money. But again, nice news for you. It shows, our report shows that you will likely have a lesser tax increase needed if you break off than if you were to stay with Alpine School District. All right, now we'll get into, again, I talked about the general fund, the capital fund, and the debt fund. The general fund is comprised of local, state, and federal funds. Local is generated through property taxes collected for the school district by the county. You'll have higher taxable value compared to enrollment. I've beat that to death. The state funds are distributed based generally on the WPU assumptions and attempts, as I've said, to provide some type of equalization. Because we have assumed, our analysis points to the fact you'll have higher taxable value per student, we think those will get decreased a little bit. And the federal monies are equalized, they follow the student. So wherever the student goes, those federal dollars just trail right behind. So it's a pretty neutral thing for us to have to look at, quite frankly. So the base expenditures are based on several key factors. And this one is really important because you'll see a slide in a minute where it looks like everyone and their dog's in a deficit. The reason for that is we've based the general fund expenditures on Alpine School District's fiscal year 2024 budget. And like you, they have to have, like cities, they have to have a balanced budget. So you'll say, well, why are they showing a deficit? Well, also, like you in a way, right? You do a budget and you say, oh, we think we're going to get X in terms of sales tax. But unless you can get my children to move to your city, you cannot probably guarantee enough sales tax generation always, right? Because it fluctuates with the economy. So similarly, the school district has to budget what they estimate they're going to get from the state. So we started out with that base, but then we got new data from the state and in the revised state worksheets, and they are not likely to fund what the school district was assuming they would get from the state. And so For all of, in the written report, we show a deficit in the general fund per student in every one of those scenarios, but it's because of that. Again, we're trying to use current data. I'm not trying to poke them and say, you missed estimating what the state was going to pay you, right? I mean, that kind of stuff happens in budget. We're trying to say this is the current data we have. If we apply it to existing Alpine School District as currently constituted, we apply that same, we take those numbers and break them up like we need to for the new Central District and for the reorganized remaining South District. Here's what it looks like. Comparatively, your view on that is the best of the three. Something else that we've done, we identified the salaries and benefits from duplicated administrative full-time equivalent employees. So the MGT analysis that you may or may not have seen that Alpine School District had them do, they, and again, not faulting it, they used, there are two different methodologies. We've tried to give you a look at what we think their methodology, I'll go through that in a minute, what their methodology would produce. And, they're two different looks. In generalities, they both point to the same conclusion, which is good for you. They, however, only looked at a 1-year snapshot, and they looked at it, they were retained to do it in 23, got done in 24, so I think they looked at 24 snapshot, and it's like, here's what it would look like this next year. Well, that's great, and it is hard to project because you don't know if you're going to be spot on, right? But one thing we did notice in their study is they did not seek to talk about like the duplicative costs if the school districts broke up. No matter how good and efficient you are, every school district's going to need an administrator, a superintendent, they're going to need usually an assistant superintendent. So we have looked at that, and it's not a gigantic needle mover, but it is important. And so we have looked at that. In total, those administrative costs are roughly about 3.5% of the school district's budget. The majority of their expenses in their general fund come from teacher salaries. So, like a city, when you look at, what's the big driver for our budget? It's probably personnel, fire, police, your staff, right? Because that usually makes up somewhere between 70 and 80% of most cities' budgets. Not uncommonly for a school district, about 72% of their expense is for the cost for them to pay their instructors. So again, that matters a lot, and the administration, while important, it is less than 4%. So be aware of that. And we're going to go through the two allocation scenarios. We looked at it first on an enrollment basis. That's how we looked at it for the west side, because we had historical enrollment data. We could project that forward. We will also look at it from a facilities basis, which is more like MGT looked at it, and identifying, okay, here's the facilities that we have and know that are going to be in each area, and here are the facilities that have been identified by the school district. Again, we're trying to use their data, so we're comparing apples to apples. The facilities that the school district has identified that it wants to build, they gave us a dollar amount, location, and then they had another list that had like on the watch list. We didn't know what that meant. So we haven't put anything in the watch list into the analysis, only those things. And I've got a table that shows them in a minute. So the MGT looked, and again, we've tried with, our set of eyes, we've tried to replicate, that philosophy in looking at this two ways. So I'll refer to scenario one, that will be the enrollment scenario. So now think of it from an enrollment perspective, right? It's going to produce numbers that are more straight line, not flat line, but straight line, right? Because we've assumed that there's going to be, percentage growth because of inflation going forward. So it's going to be a more straight line because we're showing that enrollment's growing by 3% a year, or whatever number Fred can justify. So 3% a year, we're showing that's how enrollment's going to grow. So the concluding slides that show what the cost is going to be, it looks more straight line, right? The MGT study and our view and looking at it from a facilities standpoint, and there's not really a right or wrong. It's just two different ways of looking at the same problem. The facilities approach is, for example, we know that they want a new high school and a new elementary and whatever, new bus barn, right? And they've given us, when they think those are going to come in, what the cost is. We've inflated those costs. We've taken today's dollars, we've inflated those construction costs. But those aren't going to come in a nice linear fashion. They're going to come in lumpy chunks, right? So, boom, new 100 and whatever $1 million renovation for a high school. That's going to have a lumpier impact on the numbers, which you'll see here in a moment. Oh. Okay, under scenario 1, it's anticipated that the division of the new district could result in combined duplicated costs of approximately $4.9 million for all the districts. So that doesn't mean that's the cost that's going to come to your district. We've talked about those duplication of costs. We have taken those into account. Since you're expected to have higher per pupil expenditures relative to Alpine School District in the early years, because you have a lot of students and you do have some growth and more need of a few more facilities than they do. And as we're doing that math, it's a result of the higher ratio of duplicate administrative costs as well as your enrollment multiples. However, due to the higher taxable value per student, the net general fund deficit per student is less than the deficit in either the remaining Alpine School District as currently constituted or in the reorganized Alpine School. So the scenario 1 is the enrollment base. Again, the more smoother line approach to the expenditure. This analysis is primarily, but not solely, driven by that percentage of enrollment increase. So as we've touched on, the instruction expense is the largest portion of that budget. And it includes student support services, instructional support services, and student transportation services. So think of buses and bus yards and that kind of thing. So all of those things in scenario 1, we have grown percentage growth based on what we estimate the student growth multiplier will be. We have inflated that, the cost, again, this is expenditure detail, we've inflated the cost, the general cost by 1%, and by employment, we've inflated that by 2.5%. Again, that may be higher in the future. Maybe we'll go into another mini recession, I hope not, and that won't be needed to be as high. It's a reasonable assumption. Talked about duplicate administrative expenses. The exceptions where we have not done it in a sort of a straight line fashion is related to the operation and maintenance of the plant being each of the schools, right, in combination. So each of them are going to have electric bills and water bills and whatever. So those elements we have done based on the percent of facilities that remain in each of the school districts as they break up. The district administrative functions, again, that's based on a percent of the full-time equivalents. And then the school administrative functions, think of the secretaries that sit in the front desk of your elementary. We've tracked those so that they follow the school, not the enrollment. Okay, and I've got to refer to something that is in the written report, not in front of you. Okay, the new district under scenario 1. So nobody ever likes to see negative numbers, right? So you're like, all right, how can you mean that this is better for us? Well, we have that's a snapshot of the new district. Again, that's what you have to look at for the purposes of this analysis. But in the written report, we talk about what the impact to Alpine School District as well as the reorganized district, again, meaning the 4 cities to the south of the district. So the part of the negative here on a per student basis is because of that that budgetary issue that I indicated, is that they start out with a balanced budget, but then we learned that the state revenues are going to be less, so it creates a deficit. So this deficit per student, right? If you look, we'll just take a couple of snapshots. So you can see that for the new central district, for all of you, the deficit in the general fund per student, based on all this, is starts out at $195 deficit. It goes down to 186, 157, 121, 75, and you continue to work your way out of it. Again, this is the straight line look, right? You continue to work your way out of it by about year 9 or 10. But, so keep, you got those numbers in front of your face. In front of my face, I have what it looks like for Alpine School District. For Alpine School District, their current general fund per student deficit is $202. Then goes down to 186. Again, this is in a written report that we can make available. Goes down to 186, 149, 104, and 49. So theirs starts out about the same. You're about tied the second year, and then they get a little bit less deficit per student, but yours continues to drop like theirs continues to drop. The reorganized district, so if you break away, West breaks away, the reorganized schools, those 4 to the south, their net general fund per student deficit is 274, 244, 197, 145, and 87. So again, of them, you are in a very good and, what is the word, viable position to create this new district. Let's see. The reason the deficit is projected to decrease over time is due to your higher local revenue growth, right? Because you're going to have more taxable value relative to the number of students. Oh. Scenario 2. Oh, there it is. All right, scenario 2 is the facilities look at this. We look at the expenditures that each new district will incur based on the facilities that they have in them, and that they will have to bring into them with the new high schools or elementary that they need. So it's primarily driven by the percentage of facilities, and it matches what the MGT study did, that Alpine School District provided the allocation to them. We use inflation over those new facilities, and we do not take into account the weighted pupil unit growth multiplier, because again, we're looking at it from just, okay, what does this mean from a facilities perspective? We have added the O&M expense based on a new elementary school, because for this new district, one of the things that they have identified, this Alpine School District has a new elementary that would be coming into this district, and a refurbishment of a high school. The new elementary, obviously you're going to have new O&M there, right? Because you don't have currently the 2 times 7, 14 teachers and the administrative staff and the principal, right? So we've added in O&M expense relative to that new facility. For the refurbishment of the high school, we haven't added any expense. We're assuming that, whatever they have in terms of number of teachers, that when they, make it newer and more swell, that they, won't need any more new teachers. We still have added in the duplicate administrative expense. All right. Under the second financial scenario, expenditure functions are largely allocated based on the percentages used in the existing April 2024 MGT reconfiguration feasibility study. We have added in the operation and maintenance plan expenditure we talked about. And we've also tried to allocate sort of the new student transportation services, and allocated that we've kind of come back and had to allocate that on an enrollment basis. So there was Ours is a little bit of a mixture, not just straight facility. The most recent Alpine School District budget estimates were used as a base from fiscal year '24, and we inflated those expenditures for subsequent years. However, this scenario does not apply the additional enrollment multiplier based on weighted pupil unit growth to the expense projections. Instead, we look at the new operational maintenance costs that will be added because of the new facilities. Under this scenario as well, it is anticipated that the creation of the new district could result, will have combined administrative costs, so we've taken that into account. In this scenario, though, those administrative costs are assumed to be higher, again, early on, because they come on in lumpy chunks. It's not like I get 1/1000th of a principal every time I get a student, right? And the enrollment projection, to a large degree, assumes something kind of like that. It's more linear. The facilities projection looks at it in these lumpy chunks of, oh, you're going to have a new elementary and a new whatever. So they come on in odder chunks, and so the duplicated expenses were a little bit higher as we looked at it in this option. While the new central deficit, that slide, yes. So then the deficit here for the new central district, as you may or may not recall, but on the other slide in the more linear fashion, it was only 195 of a per student deficit compared to the other options if you stayed together. Here it's higher, 256, because again it's come on in a lumpy chunk, but you work out of it faster, right? So the good news is that either way that you look at it, it leads us to the same general conclusion. Nobody can stand up here and say this is exactly what is going to happen if we form a new school district, right? So we kind of thought of, since we had a little bit of extra time, if we look at it from two different perspectives and they both get us to the same general conclusion, that it made us feel much better about the likelihood of that being the result, even though the exact numbers may be different. Okay. Okay, the Capital Projects Fund, the quick version is we assumed it was pretty neutral. We kind of neutralized it away. The reason for that is based on current tax levies provided from Alpine School District. We looked at that, for both scenarios. The capital projects funds can be augmented by state support programs that look at enrollment growth and what's called the foundation guarantee. And I only know enough to be not even know enough to be dangerous on the foundation guarantee. The enrollment growth fund is again one of the things that the state looks at as they try to equalize stuff. Through these funds, both of them, the districts with smaller tax base per pupil and higher growth. So you will have a higher tax base per pupil, but you will still have the higher growth. So my staff concluded that you would still be likely to receive some benefit from the enrollment growth funds from the state, but not from the foundation revenues. Capital expenditures are allocated to each district based primarily on the percentage of education buildings within each district, land acquisition and land improvement, building acquisition. We have concluded we would need to do a much deeper dive into the school district's capital improvement plan, because it's not clear to us whether those costs have been excluded from the debt that they had listed for each of those buildings. So we basically assumed it away. Rather than risk double counting it, we assumed that it's already been counted in the debt numbers. The net of all of that is it results in a positive fund balance in the capital projects fund, if I look at Alpine School District. And if that is indeed the case, when the school districts split, you will all get benefit in a part of that. Each of the three districts that split will get to share in that capital projects fund. However, we note that each of those school districts also has a lot of needs identified that the school district has identified, and even some that have been discussed that aren't on the school district's list, such as a new, I'm not going to get the word right, technical high school is what I'm going to call it, in Lehigh that has been discussed. It is not on Alpine School District's list right now. So yes, you may get the benefit of, I'm just making this number up. Let's say you break up and you get the benefit of $10 million to go toward that capital, those capital needs. Well, that's great, but you may want to do that high school, which is going to be $100 million, right? So it's kind of a drop in the bucket, and we don't know what way it's going to go. So we just neutralize that, and even though we can see that there may be a benefit there, the conservative approach was to neutralize it away, quite frankly. Here we go. No tax. The good news is, but because of that, there will be no tax increase related to that capital project. We all like no tax increase. Right? We've allocated 100% of the proposed bond recommendations to the debt service fund, which I'll talk about now. So there's not a perfect playbook. I think after the Jordan Canyon split, I think some laws changed. And yet there's still not a perfect playbook of what happens if the school districts do split, what happens with their existing debt. What the majority of debt service fund revenues come from local property taxes, with a small, and I mean very small portion coming from interest earnings, relative to your property taxes. Interest earnings are a smidgen. The current debt service tax by the school district is 0.00102. Since the debt service fund revenues rely largely on property tax, the feasibility of the new central district will be influenced greatly by how that debt is shared. There are three major components included in the analysis of this fund: the outstanding bonds, new bonding needs, and startup costs. So again, we've looked at the new bonding needs as identified by Alpine School District. If you are all like, yay, we'll create this new district and we'll build 5 new elementaries and a new high school, you can take this and just put it in the shredder, right? Because we've looked at what Alpine School District is currently contemplating. But no, and it's an important thing to know, that if the new school district is created, those decisions will be made by a more localized group of individuals about what your students need. And that's usually one of the real driving forces for cities in determining whether they want to split or not. So we look at their outstanding debt, and we looked at the current 2 days taxable value for each of the cities that would be in the remaining Alpine School District and the new Central School District. And the new Central School District, you would have to assume 45% of that existing debt. A lot of debt that you have to assume. But you have to think of, as a whole district, some of their taxes pay for your taxes go to pay for their school. So we are assuming that they will, look at it from a taxable value perspective. What we don't know is whether you'll be able to have a seat at the table and say, well, hey, our taxable value when the 2014 bonds were done was very different on a pro rata basis than it is today, right? So certainly, I would encourage as much negotiation related to that as possible. The most rational thing we can do with what we know today is to say, based on today's taxable value, if they divided that debt up, you would get 45% of that. And there. I always like it when I'm on the same page. You're really quite magical at this, so good job. So it's important to note, as we looked at the startup costs, that's an element in your, it's like, well, where are you going to get startup costs? Where you'll have to bond for that. So as we looked at the startup costs, we did take $12.5 million in unassigned fund balance from Alpine School District and allocated it to each district based on the ratio of enrollment for purposes of funding startup costs. So in regard to that enrollment number, you make up 45%. Remember the 41%. The 45 we just talked about was related to taxable value for carrying the debt. The 41% is based on your enrollment. So we estimated, based on previous studies that we, then lasted forward with inflation. So we looked at, what happened with Jordan and Canyons, and we inflated those numbers. So legal fees, moving, et cetera, we estimate that those would cost $3.9 million. New computers and network system, $3.7 million. So the total new startup costs would be $7.6 million, but that 41% reduction from that unassigned fund balance would be the $7.6 million minus the 5.1. We think the remaining startup costs that the new district would need would be about $2.5 million that you would then put into the bond, which is shown on the next page. So here we have the list from Alpine School District as to what facilities they saw in existing Alpine School District, again, as currently constituted, including the West District. They've said, they think their total bonding needs would be $512 million. For your proposed district, the new Central District, they've got the startup funds at $2.5 million. We just talked about one elementary facility and a renovation and remodel of one high school is what's on their list currently. So for the new district, you would have to incur the debt of $112 million. The reorganized district, again, if the West breaks up and you create your own district, the Orem South group would have $125 million of debt. So quickly you can see, once again, Laura, though, $1,012,000 and $125 million don't add up to $512. The balance of that is in the West, right? So again, you can just intuitively see how the West has a bigger, challenge in overcoming to get back to square one, so to speak, but they have a ton of growth potential. Let's see. So the new bonding obligations are going to be lower for your Central District than for either the reorganized district or Alpine School District as a whole. And intuitively, you can say that we're benefited by that, right? Because we've already talked about you'll have a higher taxable value, and now you'll have to issue a little bit less debt, relative to all. In looking at the bond, we do note that in the $112 million bond, we chose to amortize that over 20 years. The useful life of those facilities will at least be 30, 40, maybe even more. Alpine School District has historically kept their debt very short, so we do diverge from that. What they've done, their debt is usually about 10 years. So it would be a longer payout, but it helps to keep your tax rates down. All right, drum roll. The general fund will likely result in a deficit, but again, that's true across the board. But it's likely to overcome that deficit within, if you look at the facilities version, you overcome that deficit in about 3 years. If you look at the enrollment version, you overcome it in 10. So it's a matter of, rather than the big hit up front, it's a little bit less over a longer runway. In the capital outlay fund, a surplus is possible, but it's a little bit too hard for us to pin down right now. And the debt service, you'll see a reduction due to less of a lower need for bonding than the remaining pieces of the current school district. So now this, it's very important that, because in this case, it's like, oh, yay, I'm going to have to pay less per household. I don't want anyone leaving this room going, if we do this, my taxes are going to go down, because that is not what this is intending to show. What this is intending to show is that your taxes will be less, $8 in the first year, $8.82 per household per month less than me comparing to the Alpine School. Okay, it doesn't mean they're going to go down. It just means relative to the other way we're looking at it, that you are benefited by that. So you'll experience a tax savings as compared to staying with Alpine School District as a whole. You cannot issue $112 million of debt and not raise your tax. So I just want to make sure that that is crystal clear, okay? It's a tax savings compared to Alpine School District, not, yay, our taxes are going to go down. In our analysis, the tax impact, so the reduction you get compared to Alpine School District decreases over time. It's because of the way we've looked at the enrollment and the facilities. And frankly, my best guess is if we tried to extend this with new facilities, you'd see it kind of do this. And then you're right. But we haven't had the time to look at it over a longer period of time with more detail. All right. So that, the one I just showed you was what we think will happen relative to the straight line approach, the enrollment approach. Again, trying to look at it two ways and say, do they come to roughly the same conclusion that yes, there's going to be a savings compared to Alpine School District? Yes, but you remember how the expense was bigger in those early years, right? And then you caught up faster with the lumpy chunks look of the facilities. That bears out here, that the savings compared to Alpine School District in the early years is minimal at $1 per household, but then it increases because they've effectively funded those facilities. You've sucked it up and done that, and then you get a bigger benefit. But again, the great news is that under either way we've looked at this, it appears that it's very, very viable for the new school district. And with that, any heaven sent whatever that Fred is available to answer questions. I wasn't having any angelic help getting here today, I'll tell you that. So with that, I will be happy to take questions. I will say that, again, I am not the master of the Excel model. I would have loved Fred to be here, but we had to kind of divide and conquer. And if I can answer the questions, I will. If I cannot, I will research them and get back, and it can be shared with everyone.
Let me just ask this. Is it more convenient to come up to the microphones if you want to pass the microphone out? I think it'd be easier just to.
Ladies and gentlemen, will you please remember we need to speak directly into the microphone, and please state your name and what city you're from for the record. Thank you.
Okay, Mayor Kurt Ostler, a couple of questions. You put in there a startup cost for the central district, but you did not have a startup cost down for the reorganized, it appeared, district with that assumption. And then I have a second question after that.
Okay, so the reorganized district they're already going.
Okay, so that's why there's no cost there.
Yes.
Okay, my second one, you put down amortization that Alpine School District currently, and that this way, are they currently amortizing for 10 years? And so their costs are a lot higher, and your assumption is amortizing for 20 years. So that does do a boost.
That does help. Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
Yep, you got it. You've got one in the back, just so you know.
Okay, I'll just do quick.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to.
Scott
watch
Smith
yours
from
tonight.
Highland City Council. So you said that the central district will assume 45% of the Alpine School District debt.
Correct.
You didn't tell us how much debt that was.
And I forgot to check, but I will find that out and let you know.
It'd be kind of a nice thing to know.
Yes, it certainly will be. Oh, Fred is trying to log into the meeting, and I'll bet he can go on to our spreadsheet. I'll field that question. What is
I do have a quick question, unless you're looking something up right now. I'm over here. It's Tim
Oh,
Hawley.
there you
I'm in the American Fork City Council. I have a couple of quick questions, although I might have forgot the first one. Did you compare to the updated school district numbers? I noticed that you compared to the MGT study, but the school district redid some financials. Did we compare?
No, we did not compare
Okay.
to that.
And I forgot what the second question was, so I'll just pass the mic.
It'll come back to you. Always does.
I was curious, with the projected deficit, is a state, oh, I'm sorry. My name is Chrissy Hanneman. I'm on the Alpine City Council. There we go. Now I forgot do you know if it's legal for a school district to operate under a deficit, or would we immediately have to raise taxes to cover the deficit or lay people off?
That's a very good question. And what I assume will happen is that Alpine School District, they, like you, have to operate with a balanced budget. So when they get informed, when they've been informed, they haven't updated their budget, they will have to, on their end, they will make those decisions about where they're going to make cuts, right? If we already knew that, then we would have started out with those cuts already in this budget and in those comparisons. So my best idea of what would likely to happen going forward is that they will correct that before you actually, break away from them. Does that make sense? So again, we were trying to show just, here's what it looks like with all the data we have today, right? That will change a little bit. My guess is that it will start out so that it will be a neutral budget. But again, the impact here was to see that for the Alpine School District, with where they are, with what we're showing as that deficit, it's a $202 deficit in the first year. For you, it's $195, and for the reorganized district, it's $274. So yes, follow-up question.
So the first question was, so nobody is allowed to operate under a deficit. So from the get-go, if we, as a central...
And let me make one clarification. They
If we have a
can draw
central-
from fund balance.
I'm sorry.
You can draw from fund balance.
Okay, thank you.
You can't
If
budget
we're-
to a deficit, but you can draw from fund balance.
You're using fund balance, though, for our startup costs?
Yes.
Okay, I'm
That
an
is
accountant,
correct.
So I'm trying to figure out the money. So if we start at a deficit position because our costs due to our more facilities and revenue allocations are at a deficit,
right?
Out of the gate, we would resolve those issues.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so Paul Hancock, Lehigh City Council. In the analysis on the capital funding and the bonding needs, you mentioned that we would carry 45% of the debt from Alpine School District. When you
Yes.
were looking at the analysis where we add 112 for our startup cost plus capital funds,
right?
Did that account for the fact that those bonds start to drop off and our 45% of that debt obligation also falls off as the years progress?
Great question for Fred. I mean, again, their debt is very short, and so that obligation should fall off very quickly. I mean, the earliest bond that they still have is 2014. It likely pays off
And that's
this,
what I looked
this
at. Is there's
year.
nothing before 2013,
Yes.
which would
Yes.
suggest the 10-year bond
Yes.
cycle. Like you
I think
said.
he's got that data in one of his gajillion spreadsheets. And I hear that he's in the meeting. Da-da-da-da.
The voice
So,
from,
yeah. From heaven. It's from heaven for me. And Fred.
Yes, I heard the question.
Okay, that's what I want to know. Thank you.
And yes, we do account for the phasing of debt. So as it falls off in the model. But again, our picture is a pretty short window. So we're looking at, through 2029. So there is some debt that falls off, looks like. So yes, we account for that.
So I assume, Fred, that some of that debt falls off in 2024.
Yes.
Trying to find. Do you have a total of their outstanding debt? That was a question that was asked before you got on. If not, we can certainly get that.
The model we only brought in at 2035, so I'm not sure if any of these go beyond 2035.
but there is through 2035, it looks to be through starting in 2024 about 487 million.
I'm sorry, how much?
487.
Okay, I say 7 million through me. I'm like, there is no way. 487 million. Yes, okay.
Carla Merrill from Alpine City. So I had a question about the numbers. You guys are showing numbers showing from 2025. My understanding is if the initiative or the interlocal passes in November this year, the split usually takes 3 years. So are we to assume like these numbers, instead of showing 2025 and 2026, it's just year 1, year 2 based on present numbers?
That is an accurate way to look at that, yeah.
Heather Newell, Lehigh City Council. I'm curious with the last slide that you're talking about relative to all of Alpine School District, the tax savings. Did you look at with, if we were not to move forward, but the West did, if we were our school central and the reorganized district, what the tax savings may be or the deficit for
We
that?
have not. That is something, what I discussed with the city managers I met with earlier today, that is something we could look at given more time. This study gives you what you need to say we want to go ahead, and then we could proceed to look at that, sort of, we'll call them options A and B instead of 1 and 2, right? To see what that would look like, but we don't have that data available.
So I do remember my other question is Tim Hawley from American Fork again. So we're looking at the benefits. Are there any reasons why you feel we shouldn't go forward with this? Any red flags or anything warning? Instead of just looking at the pros and the benefits of this, in your study, did you see anything, hey, this would be maybe not a good idea to move forward with this?
There's nothing that leaps out at me. I mean, I do like, I'm certainly in support of more local control. I do think, I live in Murray, and I do think a city-only school district can be too small. I have seen that in my children's own school district. But I think this is a good size school district. I will say that when I talked to various city council members in Lehigh several months ago, I had found, and unfortunately didn't make good enough notes, I'd found the study that was done that said, basically it concluded that, school district in the 45 to 60,000 was kind of like the best size, right? Didn't write it down. Jason said, can you find that site? Sure, I thought, clickety click click. And lo and behold, the first thing that was on my computer when I got home is, this is updated. You now have the new Meta AI. And I was like, right. I asked the same question 10 different ways, trying to find that same study and can't find it. So I have to recant on that statement. I did find a really long, and I read a large portion of it, a study that was done by, I think, the University of Chicago. And what it concluded was, in 98 pages of research, it depends. I mean, that could have been the final, depends on this and depends on that, and this can be good and that can be bad. So I don't know that there's a perfect size. I did ask the same question of one of my colleagues that works with several school districts. He indicated that business administrators he works with thinks that the 40 to 60,000 is kind of an ideal size to administer. So I think you could be too small if if one of you cities just decided to go off on your own. I think this is a good size of district. I think you're well aligned, geographically. This is Laura Lewis's opinion and only my opinion. I think one of the challenges that the current Alpine School District, as currently constituted, has is you have the haves and have-nots, right? And a lot of them that already have their schools and have raised their kids and are seeing declining enrollment don't feel the need to pay for students who, let's see, vote for new high school that my kids will never use. Nope. I think this group is more aligned with that, so I think it could be better from a governance perspective. So nothing screams at me. Fred, what's your response to that? You've been in the numbers a lot deeper than me.
Yeah, so going back to the purpose of the study, this is a financial evaluation. And tax impact analysis. So quantifiably, we're trying to present that data. But the only thing I'd add to what you said, Laura, is and this isn't necessarily a positive or a negative, but another maybe a consequence that is difficult to quantify in the short is the nature of funding and the proportional allocation of cost. So right now, there may be an allocation of cost that's skewed to one area within the district versus another area. And that creates some evaluation and looking at things through a microscope, so to speak. But that's not always going to be the case. And so I think what you need, all voters and the public needs to think about is this is an entity that will be around for a long time if it's created. And that the nature of that capital investment specifically and debt service will ebb and flow. And so that's a caution I put this, that we're looking at a short time frame, and there's a lot of assumptions that will likely change over time that will influence feasibility. So we need to be aware of that.
And one thing I would add is, I led with this. We haven't looked at and don't, our firm does not have the expertise to look at what the impact would be on programs, right? It's, for programmatic reasons that I think school districts, if they're too small, it can be problematic. But again, we don't have the expertise to look at that, so you would need to talk to someone with a different skill set than we have to say, oh, is this size of school district still support, special ed in the way it needs to, or Chinese immersion, or whatever special programs I can think of. I will say that, I'm an old parent of young kids. I'm way old, 62, and I have a 16-year-old. So, wow, right? So, we live in Murray School District, and my daughter is ethnic. My kids are both adopted, and she didn't want to go and be in the sea of white kids. So I'm like, okay, where do you want to go? Because she'd gone to a private school up through middle school, and she really wanted to go Salt Lake City School District because they had more ethnic diversity, and she's really into athletics and whatever. Okay, fine. So, just from my single person experience, even if the programs aren't going to be in your school district, it hasn't been very difficult to move her to another school. I mean, we still live in Murray, difficult in terms of drive time, but in terms of program availability, we're so densely populated here. It's not like, in my mind, it's not like you're going to lose, your kid really wants to go to Chinese immersion, and that isn't in this school district. My guess is that there's a way to get them involved in that at another school district. Again, it was fill out a form, submit it. Schools don't hate it because some money comes with it, right? They get some weighted student money that comes with that. So there's some benefit to that. In the Jordan School District, I know that the one school that will not take, maybe I've got it wrong, maybe it's the Canyon School District, but Corner Canyon, my understanding is they won't take any outside students. But that is, from what I know, a fairly rare occurrence. So that may help negate that programmatic risk, but I certainly don't know what it would be.
Okay, if I can say something, Highland City has another meeting that starts in a very short time. Lehigh, actually, we were going to start our second count 30. So we need to wrap this up pretty quickly, I guess what I was saying. Are there a few more questions that we can't get answered?
Michelle Stallings from Lehigh City, City Council. So I just wanted to clarify a comment you made about the outstanding debt, and it's based on the taxable value, but yes, you made it's not specified in state code that it's at this point in time. It could possibly be at the time the bond was taken out.
I'll bet if you give Fred about 1 minute, he can recite that code for you. Because he's got a computer in front of him.
Well, I think
come on, Fred.
The comment I want to highlight is that we're not certain how to interpret the statute
There you go.
relative to the allocation of debt moving forward. And in the statute, there is, again, since we're not attorneys, there may be some interpretation of how to allocate existing debt. Essentially, that may be a negotiation point as you work through this exercise. How we read the statute, we applied that 45%. What I'm uncertain about is as you move forward in time, does that get adjusted at all? And that is a calculation that gets calculated every year, or is it set in stone at the point of creation? I'm uncertain on that element.
The question I would have is, Brad Frost, American Fork City, in your analysis, was there an attempt and was there any collaboration with MGT? Just to say we saved some time, or we wanted to interpret their numbers the way they had it, or I just maybe
Yeah.
for...
We received data, so we did not collaborate directly with MGT. We received data and then created the models and the analysis, and we essentially had enough time to do that with the data that was already given to us.
Hey, I have a question. This actually comes from Mayor Osler. In the state code, is it I believe, and this was his question, I think it is mine too, I think you need to offer a recommendation.
Oh,
yeah,
easy enough.
Yeah.
I recommend that it is viable for the central district to be created.
Okay.
Based on our analysis.
This is Christy Hanneman. In full disclosure, I was on the school board for 8 years, so I'm more familiar with numbers than maybe every other city council member. Alpine City again. I looked at slide 19 where you took the unrestricted fund balance. We always refer to that as our rainy day fund. Is that unrestricted fund balance? There was like 12.5 million and we took 40% of it, allocated to startup costs. That obviously that was an assumption, but just in full disclosure, that was usually money we didn't ever want to touch when I was on the school board.
And the idea with sharing of it is if you broke the school district up, you wouldn't want to leave that pot of money just with the remaining school district. So you could, yes, we did choose to spend it on startup costs. That is correct. Yep.
Okay, we'll take this last question if it's okay.
Clark Taylor, American Fork City. Mayor Merrill mentioned that it's 3 years. There's some discussion. Perhaps it's when, the timeline from when it starts or when the election is done. Few of us have the understanding that it was 2 years for implementation. Does anyone know what it actually is? 32 months. I'd like for you in the future to be more precise, Heather. But thank you for that.
All right. Thank you.
That's all. Thank you for the time. Okay, that being said, I don't know how we take a motion for adjournment. We can just adjourn this meeting. So everyone for